And for our new students and maybe visitors that are here tonight for the first time, what we are doing is we are reading 5 chapters of the New Testament each day for a week. Then the following week we read the next 5 chapters, so on and so forth. We started this, I think, around last November, and now we are all the way up into 2 Thessalonians. 2 Thessalonians. And so that's where we're going to be tonight. So you can go ahead and be turning your Bibles there. And remember in our class on Sunday, we talked about the 1 Thessalonians, of course, especially the first 3 or 4 chapters of that. And if you remember, it had a lot to do with the coming of Christ. That was what the big concern was. And if you remember, it had a lot to say about it. Not only that, it was mentioned in every chapter of 1 Thessalonians, talking about the coming of Christ. They had a lot of confusion about it. Mentioned in every chapter of 1 Thessalonians. In 2 Thessalonians, 2 events, he says, must take place before the Lord returns. And it's going to be good tonight. I enjoyed this study, and I pray that you will as well. There's some things in there that you wonder, well, what in the world is that talking about? As you've been reading it, you've seen, it's like, well, man, what is the son of perdition and the man of sin and all of these other things that he's talking about? 2 events that he talks about must take place before the Lord comes again. The falling away, as we'll see, and we'll talk more about that, and then the man of sin, both of those in chapter 2, verse 3. So, 2 Thessalonians, and we discussed chapter 1 last week, but in chapter 2, he talks about this man of sin, and we'll be spending a lot of our time on that. Let's first of all talk about the falling away. Those 2 things have to happen before the Lord will return. All right, the falling away. Do you think that's happened yet? Okay. And then the man of sin. Let's talk about, first of all, the falling away. He warned about this. This has to happen before the Lord will return. Well, Paul had warned the Ephesian elders, and I want to take some time and just read all of these, just to remind us. Go with me to Acts chapter 20, because I think this is important to kind of set the background for the second thing that we're going to discuss, that man of sin. In Acts chapter 20, verses 29 and 30, "For I know this," remember he's talking to the Ephesian elders, "For I know this, that after my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock." Is he talking about literal wolves there? This Red Riding Hood and the big bad wolf? Is he talking about literal wolves? Then what's he talking about? His brethren? False teachers? Now just stop and think about that for a moment. You call a false teacher a ravening wolves. What do ravening wolves do? They eat sheep. They devour them. Have you ever... Well, I won't ask that because that could get gross. But it's not a pretty sight if you come upon a wolf kill. I'll just put it that way. Ravening wolves. And then look at verse 30. "Also from among yourselves men will rise up, speaking perverse things to draw away the disciples after themselves." Are false teachers a big deal? Is false teaching a big deal? Is it something that we ought to be concerned about? Is it something that elders need to watch out for? It absolutely is, isn't it? If you think about, preachers these prosperity preachers now that only speak positive things, that would be great. That would be a wonderful thing if you only had positive things to talk about all the time. But are there times of warning? Are there times of pointing out things that could lead somebody to hell instead of to heaven? Yeah, these are ravening wolves. This is not a pretty picture. And he's serious about this. Then he warned Timothy as well. Look at 1 Timothy chapter 4. And this is the one I really want us to pay attention to. Just keep this in your mind for the second point we're going to discuss. 1 Timothy chapter 4. Verses 1 through 3. So still talking about this falling away. 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. "Now the Spirit expressly says that in the latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons. You see the descriptive terms again? Doctrine of demons, doctrine of devils. That's not a good thing. What will they do? Verse 2, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron. Yeah, the next verse right here. Just keep this in mind. This is going to be a part of what's going to happen when this falling away takes place. Some of the things that they're going to be teaching: forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. You know of any religions that require some people not to marry? Don't give it away yet. And do you know of anybody that, certain religions that will not let you eat meat on Fridays, used to be, and during the certain time of year, to abstain from meats? Just keep these things in mind. Let's look at one more as well. Peter warned the Christians in Asia Minor. Look at 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Listen to what Peter says. But there were also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who bought them, and bring on themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. How are they going to do this? Are they going to come in and say, listen, hey, we're here as wolves. My goal is to tear this congregation apart, and I'm wanting to lead as many people to hell as I possibly can. Is that how they come in? No. Secretly, they'll come in and start talking about things. So, well, John shows that the falling away did come. And that's kind of where Sunday afternoon sermon came from, talking about the Antichrist. He said they were already in the world. And this was 2,000 years ago when John wrote his letter. It was already taking place. The seeds, at least, were planted in that. And so the falling away was already starting to take place, but it was going to come in earnest. Well, it continued through the centuries. And if we had unlimited amount of time, I would absolutely love to walk us through each of the steps that you can just see in leading the church away from what it was. Let me just give you some examples. Error in leadership. This was a big one, and this was really the first thing that you could look at and say, obviously this is wrong. When Paul and Titus, and he told them Titus to set up elderships and all of these things, and Paul set up elderships in the places where he would go. But they would always have elders, a plurality of elders, and over each local congregation, each local flock. They were called pastors, bishops, as we know, elders. You know all of that. Well, what ended up happening, one of the first things that happened, we've got several churches of Christ in Memphis. We'll just use us for an example. Several congregations here in the Memphis area, and most of them have elderships. But they said, let's just have one elder in each of these congregations kind of be the lead elder, the head elder. Not just for the month, not the contact elder for the month, but all the time. This is the guy that you run everything through. So it started in doing that, and you can even say he is the pastor. Even in the 2nd century, they were starting to call people by these false names, not one of the pastors, the pastor. Well, then what ended up happening from that, you said, okay, we've got a head elder in all of these congregations. For the Memphis area, why don't we have just one above him so all of these head elders can report to him? You see, there's a problem. And so you have these local guys over the local congregations reporting to a head elder above that congregation, and those head elders reporting to this bishop, they started calling him, the bishop. Well, if you're going to have that, then you need to go a little bit further, because Memphis is in what state? Tennessee. So it goes on to now let's have one over all of the state. And so these bishops from Memphis and wherever else in Tennessee, from McMinnville and all of these areas, They would report to that one bishop, and you can just see how it starts going and going and going and going. And where is that leading? If you keep on working up like that, one, and then one, and then one, you're going to come up to one guy who's over all of them. That's where the falling away really, you could see it. You could see it. And then there's several other things. The clergy, laity. Is there a difference between a preacher and a member? Besides, maybe the preacher gets up there on Sunday. Is he over the congregation, or is he a part of the congregation and just happens to preach? He's part of the congregation. He's part of the congregation, and he's the part of the congregation where the elders have said, hey, would you do the preaching for us? Not a thing wrong with that. It's a good thing. But when it comes to distinctions and importance, there is none. But there became a line drawn between, all right, these are the clergy, these are just the members. So you start raising people up, you see. Religious holidays, church councils, creeds, instrumental music. Anybody know what century instrumental music started? 606? Yeah. 5th of the 6th centuries, yeah. So that was way after the New Testament. And then it goes on, millennialism. We talked about that on Sunday afternoon. The veneration of Mary. And there's several other things that continued to go on from this. Original sin, infant baptism, penance. And it just continued to where it just got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. But all of these things started taking place. But they really started, if you could try to pinpoint it, it started out in leadership. Started out in the leadership. And so this falling away started, and they were warned about that. Paul says, listen, he's not going to come again until there's a falling away. Let's read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to Him, we ask you not to be soon shaken in mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word or by letter, as if from us, as though the day of Christ had come. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first. That's what we're talking about now. And the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. Oh, watch verse 4. Who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things? And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness, verse 7, is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. So you have the falling away. We've talked about that. But let's look at this man of sin now for just a few moments. Or the son of perdition. That means one begotten for destruction. His day is coming. His day is coming. What are some of the things he does? Well, number one, he exalts himself above all that is called God and all that is worshipped. We're talking about a person. Exalts himself above all that is called God and all that is worshipped. He sits in the temple. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 3. I know this is another passage that you know well. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Look at verses 16 and 17. Do you not know that you are the temple of God? Talking to the Corinthians, the Christians there. You are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you. If anyone defiles the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, which temple you are. Talking to the church, the temple of God. And so this man of sin sits in the temple as God. He thinks he's the head of the church. And he acts like he is. Who really is the head of the church? Jesus Christ. He desires to be worshiped as God. And he shows himself like he is God. Getting there. I know you got comments to make. Just wait. We'll get there. his present restraint and future revealing. He was being restrained when Paul wrote. There was something that was going on that was not allowing him to go full out into the apostasy. Look at verse 8 of chapter 2. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. He was being restrained when Paul wrote. He would remain until Christ came. When's this man of sin going to be put away and be revealed for who he is? Well, when Christ comes, he would remain until then. The Lord would destroy him with the brightness of his coming. And look at verse 9. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan with all power, signs, and lying wonders. And then verse 10. And with all unrighteous deception among those who perish because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. Well, there's a lot in there. Who is this man of sin, this son of perdition? Some will say, and this is a false idea, this is one of the another reasons we talked about what we did on Sunday afternoon, that it's talking about one particular individual. And premillennialists will point to this one and say that this is the Antichrist that we talked about on Sunday afternoon. He has been everybody from Nero to Saddam Hussein to George Bush Sr., George Bush Jr., Barack Obama, Donald Trump, whoever the next president will be. Anybody who's well known is going to be called the Antichrist by these people. They think that it's just one person, and then when that one person is revealed, well then that's when the battle will take place, and that will happen right before Christ returns. But 1 John chapter 2, verse 18, what did we see already then? It said, you've heard the Antichrist will come, even so there are many Antichrists. He's already here. And there's a lot of them. It's not just one. There's a lot of them. And so I don't believe that one's the right view. Others, and this is where I would fall in, say it's a line of men with the same general character. A line of men with the same general character. So perhaps not just talking about one particular man, but a line of men who had the same character. And let me just go ahead and tell you 9 ways that the papacy, the line of popes, fits this man of sin. Let me just give you those. Number 1, as one official man as head of the church, and claims of the papacy are centered on him. So one official, that's the Pope, claims that he's the head of the church, and all the claims of papacy are centered upon this man. This man of sin came with the apostasy and came out of the apostasy. Remember what I asked you to remember from 1 Timothy chapter 4, 1 through 3? Now, when the apostasy is coming, here's how you'll know. Here's some of the things they're going to be teaching: forbidding certain people to marry, abstaining from meats, that there's nothing wrong to eat. You'll know when you start seeing these things that it's really coming out now. Spiritual pride, lawlessness, and the desire for power were hindered by the Roman government in Paul's day. So you had this desire, you know what we were talking about earlier, and here's the hindered part we were mentioning earlier. You had this development in the leadership, the development to the Pope. You know, this man who thought himself equal with God, at least on the same plane as God. Well, what's the Roman emperor going to think of him? There's only one, and you're not it. It's me. And so they were holding that back, restraining that. Well, what happens when the Roman government tumbles? Here he comes up, being restrained for a while, but when it toppled, then he ascends over everything, and they did. When the Bishop of Rome began to assert power and to claim power, he was in conflict with the Roman government. When the Roman Empire collapsed, then the Roman Church became all-powerful. The apostasy has been preserved by the line of popes. been a long time that there's been popes in this world. When did Paul say that it was going to end? When Christ came. So it was going to come and end all, or last all through that. The papacy exalts itself against God and Christ, taking titles which God alone should wear. When I worked in Muncie, we'd go to the hospital, and there they had you sign in. They had a little notepad in the front of the counter. In case there was an emergency and somebody was wanting a preacher, they would know you were in the building. But there were several times you get up there, and I always looked for my dad's name. Had he been here today? Because he would sign, and he worked for another congregation. I was working with Town Acres, so I'd always look for his names. Oh, Dad's been here today, or he hasn't been here today. But as I was scanning the names that were on that notepad, there was always a guy, and he was a good visitor. I'll give him that. But he would sign it, Father, Reverend, so-and-so, his name. He'd get 2 titles in there. Father and Reverend, so-and-so. And, that's trying to be as nice as I possibly can. Because, I've talked to him on a couple of occasions. He was a nice man in so many ways. But that's something, isn't it? To take a name reserved for God and then apply it to yourself. And then, it's not like he was letting other people call him that. When he signed his name, that's what he wrote. Now, that's not just a papal thing. That happens in denominations as well, doesn't it? Call them reverend and all of these things. We want to give them titles. They're names that are reserved just for God. Pope sits in the temple as God, as the head of the church. The papacy, quote, proves its false claims by false miracles, signs, and wonders. In order to become a saint in the Catholic Church, what would you have had to have done? 3 confirmed miracles. Confirmed miracles. And have you seen, some of the miracles that they attribute to these people? And how can you not see through that? Yeah, they do. Absolutely. And they prove these false claims by false miracles, signs, and wonders. Like I said, there in verse 9. Is this exclusive to the papacy? I don't know that I can say that. But that whole line of religious error, these are the types of the things that the man of sin would do, and it seems like it really lines up closely with that. Now, from there, we've had the Reformation. And what does it mean to reform something? People who, like Martin Luther, who saw the errors of the Catholic Church, wanted to reform it. What does it mean to reform something? Straighten it up. Straighten it up a little bit. That's right. You keep it there the way it is, but you kind of, clean the curtains, polish the floors, straighten it up a little bit. Reform it. But what do you still have when you reform it? What you started with. What's it mean to completely restore something? You go back to the original. When we talk about restoration, what are we talking about when it comes to the church? Why do we do things the way that we do? So just keep this in mind, and this is such an important fact. So you have Paul and Peter and John warning about this falling away. These are the things they're going to be talking about. These are some of the things they're going to be teaching. Look for these things. And then you see that development that's been going on now for about 2,000 years, almost as old as the church itself, almost. And you see all of that, that falling away that's been going on for all of this time. And then you came to a certain point, about the 1500s, where people start saying, this is not right. 1400s, 1200s even. This is not right. We need, there's too much wrong with this. Let's just straighten up some things. Keep the basics, but straighten up some things. And then even from that, you go farther and farther, 500, 600 years. What are we trying to do as New Testament Christians? Wade through all of that apostasy and get back to what you read about before the falling away. That's who we are. That's who we have to be. We can't be a better version of an apostate church. We've got to be what you read about in the Bible. And what's the only way that's possible? I just gave the answer away. Only go back to what the Bible teaches. That's the only way that it can be done. Now look here at this next one. Those who follow the man of sin. Watch what's going to take place. Verses 10 through 12. And with all unrighteous deception among those who perish because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason, God will send them strong delusion that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. All those who are perishing are deceived. They do not have a love for the truth that they might be saved. Do not have a love for the truth that they might be saved. There are those who do not believe the truth. Those who have pleasure in unrighteousness. And then this, they will be strengthened in their delusion. God will send them a strong delusion that they should believe the lie. How are they strengthened in their delusion? And how does God send them a strong delusion that they might believe the lie? What do you think? Did God cause Pharaoh to act the way that he did? She took the bull by the horns right there, didn't she? She answered it the only way. He hardened his heart. How did he harden his heart? How did God harden Pharaoh's heart? He gave him commands that Pharaoh didn't want to obey. And because he didn't want to obey them and didn't obey them, his heart got harder and harder and harder and harder. I told Cedric, give me $100. He doesn't want to do that. His heart will get hardened. Give me $200. He doesn't want to do that. It's getting harder. Give me $1,000. Well, he really doesn't want to do that. It's getting harder and harder and harder and harder. Have you ever noticed when it comes to people in sin, and listen so carefully to this, I know you could just preach an hour on this right here. Just like with righteousness and sinfulness, there's no such thing as being stagnant. There's no such thing. I'm going to stay at this level of righteousness, I'm going to stay at this level of sinfulness. They've got to grow up. And if you've ever noticed somebody who justifies, and we all be honest, we probably all have done this until we've repented. So we can look at our own selves. We don't have to look at other people for this one. But when you justify a wrong that you do, what happens to your heart each time you do that? It's harder, doesn't it? You rationalize, you justify, then you say, well, if I can do this, what's the progression? Then I can do that. And you justify it. And once we start doing that, the lie gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. As I was studying this week, I was thinking about somebody who was a dear family friend of ours, I love him. I still love him. This man was messing around with a woman that was not his wife. He was married to another person that we loved. And we asked him about it. No, absolutely. Someone said something about it. No, that's not true. He'd never do that. He would never do that. Asked him about it. No, absolutely not. That's ridiculous. That lady's just a friend. She's just a friend. Well, it goes further. It goes further. It goes further to where it comes out. And he had been unfaithful. And all of this time, I would never do that. That's absolutely wrong. I know that it's wrong and all of this, so I would never do that. Well, make a long story short, he knows the truth about marriage, divorce, and remarriage. I mean, he knew it. He preached it. Now, he's married to this woman, divorced his wife and married this woman, and you ought to hear him now. I've changed my thinking on that. I've changed my beliefs on that. And he said, Mark, if you'll just give me 10 minutes of your time, I think I could change yours too. And I tell you what, it broke my heart. But that's how it works. That strong delusion. And where did it start? That first desire all the way back here. Act on it a little bit, act on it a little bit, act on it a little bit to where you're so far off when you used to be so right. And it gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And this is what was going to happen to them. The delusion was not against their will, but was in accordance to their will. They wanted to do it. They wanted to do it. If your heart is not right and you want to do something, you'll find a way to justify it. If your heart is not right. If you want to do something, you can find a way to justify it in your own mind. And that's exactly what was taking place here. Those who will resist, can't end on a negative note, so let's end on this. Those who resist the man of sin will be those who love the truth. Look at verse 10 again. Those who do not love the truth are going to be deceived. Those who resist will do what? Those people who love the truth will be those who believe the truth. Verse 12. They didn't believe the truth. So it's good to ask ourselves constantly, do I truly love the truth? In other words, am I going to let the truth change me, or am I going to change the truth? Am I going to let the truth change me, or am I going to change the truth? If I let the truth change me, that's a wonderful thing, isn't it? If I change the truth, am I any better than these guys? I'm right with them, aren't I? All right. That's it. Let's get ready to have our devotional. Looking forward to worshiping in song and prayer and hearing a message from God's Word. And so let's get ready to do that at this time.